come to ask you how you're doing these days. Didn't come to roll no stones away, no. I come to tell you that the end is nigh. I come to prophesy, yeah.
I did actually. I needed one.
Hey, all right. Is that wine or beer?
Wine.
You can say it's
You
whiskey
wanted a
if you want
messenger
to sound tougher.
and
It's fine.
I
Okay, so welcome back to Talk Fiction, a podcast dedicated to entertainment media's most overlooked underdogs, fiction writers. I'm your host, Meg Oolders, author of the Waddy Award-winning YA novel C. Smile and creator of the dynamic Substack publication Stock Fiction. My guest today is Justin Deming. Justin teaches middle school in the Hudson Valley region of New York. He writes the Substack newsletter Along the Hudson and is the author of the newly published 50-word story collection, 50/50s. I will drop links to all of our amazing work in the show notes, but without further ado, allow me to introduce my distinguished guest, Justin Deming. And I didn't ask how to pronounce your last name before I did that. Did I do it correctly?
You nailed it. You got it. Yes. Well
That was
done.
so unprofessional
Thanks,
of
Meg.
me.
Thanks for having me.
Well, this is the problem when you talk to people online for a year, but don't ever have to say their name out loud.
It's been a year. Has it been longer? Well, it's been a while, right?
Probably been
At least.
longer. In fact, that's like the first thing I was going to ask, because normally I'm really good at remembering like what point I connected with someone. And I honestly can't remember how this happened, because I found you somehow. And I don't know if it was like, were you active in Fictionistas at any point? If I found you that way, or maybe.
Not really. I really have no idea, but it happened a long time ago. Isn't that funny? Yeah, I don't remember.
It feels like a long time ago, but it's really great to see you. So we don't remember where we met, which is fine. Maybe we'll remember someday, and it really doesn't matter because we're here now and we're going to chat. So this is great. So I asked you to bring a celebration and a frustration with you. And that's kind of like my little icebreaker thing. And I always used to start with my frustration for some reason. You can do it either way, whichever feels right to you. But I'm just going to hand that off to you and take it away.
Yeah, you know what? I'll start with the frustration, because even though we've been writing on this platform for so long now, I've gone through like publication name changes and all these different things. I still deal with that inner critic. Like, I am my own worst enemy. Like, when I go to hit schedule or publish, I still get in my own head. That voice pops up and it says, are you sure about that? And I struggle with that a lot. Even with publishing my book, I reached a point, like the school year started, it felt like I was almost done. We'd almost like crossed the finish line. And then I just had this weird month or two of no movement, nothing happening with it, because I was just like, should I be doing this? So I think that's still my frustration. I do think I've grown a lot in that area, but it's still something that nags at me every now and then. When I think I've written something that I really enjoy, but then I second guess it. And then I'm like, why do I do this to myself? I should just hit the publish button, move on and go about my business. But maybe that's just the part of being a fiction writer that we all deal with. And we all probably experience that at some level.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you more about that in a little bit, but what about your celebration?
So the celebration, I feel lame kind of using this because I listened to your podcast with Jordan, and I think he used the same idea, and it's just simply having finished a project. Like, it had been on the back of my mind for so long. Yeah, I was very excited to finally cross that line, because my God, I have so many half-finished novels and just stories that have fallen by the wayside, and you name it. To finally hold a book in my hands that I wrote, there's just something special about that.
This one? I'm holding it in my hand right now.
That little guy right there, yeah. So I think that was something I needed to do more for me than anything else, to just cross that threshold. And now, yes, it's fun to think about, like, what's next? What's the next item on the list that I want to accomplish,
Yeah.
So that's the celebration.
Well, congratulations on it. It's such a cool thing to have, like, in my little my lab notes thing, when I was holding everyone's books up, I'm like getting all like teary-eyed. I'm like, I want one of these. So that's definitely on my horizon. But in terms of my frustration for this session, it's really more of a case of overwhelm, I think, because I've set out to do this agent querying thing, and
Ooh.
I've made some good steps towards preparing to do the actual work, but I haven't actually like stuck my foot in and, gotten stuck in it. So I really need to just start it. And I'm overwhelmed because it's such a big sea of unknowns. I don't really have anything to go on. I don't have any leads. I mean, I have a couple names that people have thrown at me, but they're just names. They don't know who I am. You know what I mean? So I compare it a lot to, and I've never online dated because I got married in my 20s and I didn't have to. It wasn't even a thing, really. I think maybe there was like eHarmony back then was like the one, and maybe Match.com, but there's obviously a million now. But it feels very much like that, in that I'm looking at these people in a very two-dimensional way and trying to decide. I'm like, do I want to send them my book? And then I know they're looking at me in a very two-dimensional way, which they can't possibly see everything I want them to see in what I'm able to give them.
How do you know the best fit for you when that's all you have is that bio of the agent or what they publish, and then you're just rolling the dice? Okay, yeah.
I think what happens is if somebody's interested and you get to the next step of actually talking to someone, that's when like the gut stuff kicks in, because it's weird, but like when I meet people, it's either like yes or no. Like I have very
Sure.
And I feel like I hope I can trust that even if someone's offering to represent my book, if I really don't have a good feeling about the person, I hope I'll have the strength to be like, I'm just going to hang on and wait for my soulmate of agents if we're dating. So it's a big role in your professional life, and I just think it's important that it's the right person.
You'll have that strength when the moment arises.
Oh, I think so.
I have faith.
Yes.
In you.
Well, it's funny. It's like when we were talking about, after my post about getting the job, we were talking in the comments, and it was something about how, and I thought of this phrase like, oh, it's success in the absence of, what was it? Dread. It's like,
yes.
If I'm not feeling the dread, I'm like, that's probably the right way to go. So I'm going to lean into that when the time comes. And my celebration, I picked a really silly one because this is all part of the agent thing, but just to keep everything organized, like I set up an Excel spreadsheet, and like I learned how to do Excel in like high school. So I don't really remember anything, but I learned how to do a drop-down list. And I'm so excited about that because I'm actually going to be querying 2, possibly 3 different books, like not all at once to one agent, but like to different agents, because they're all so different and would require different representation. So I have that as a drop down. And then obviously there's the big drop down where it's like, what's the response? Is it a rejection? Is it a partial request? Is it a full request? So I'm celebrating the fact that I am learning how to use Excel in my 40s. So that's my very
That's amazing
celebration. I know, right? No. Yay. Now I just have to figure out how to color code all the things in there, but I'll figure it out.
Oh, I was actually going to say, yeah, that's great.
That's next. That's next on my list. That'll be my next celebration. As I mentioned before, or what I was hoping the topic for today would be, is taking leaps, because a little while ago, you posted a note on Notes. For anyone listening who doesn't know, Notes is Substack's version of Twitter, essentially. It's the place where you just say your stuff and hopefully someone listens. And a lot of people were listening that day, Justin. You had a lot of responses to that. And the note was about you getting up the courage to walk into a bookstore with your newly self-published book to ask the owner if they would sell it. So, and I just remember reading the note and like all the things you were going through, and I was literally like sweating on your behalf. I was like, oh my God, I was like so uncomfortable because I'm not even at the point where I would need to do that, but it's something I think about. Like I'm already peeking at like stores around where I live. I'm already like thinking I should be frequenting them now so that they know who the hell I am when I walk in 6 months. But maybe you could just, are you comfortable talking about that day a bit and just letting us know how that was?
I don't know if I've ever been more awkward in my life, but I pulled it off. So I went into the bookstore. I don't know what it was about that day, but I'd been telling myself for a while that I wanted to do this. And it was a sunny day. I had to bring my daughter. She had a little like tumbling class in town, and I brought my books with me, and I told my wife, I was like, today's the day. Like I'm just gonna go in and see what happens. Like what's the worst that could happen? And so I did. I brought a single copy in with me, and the place was packed. I was like, oh dear God, people are checking out. So I perused for a while. I walked around, and I was kind of like waiting for it to die down, because I was like, I can't, in front of all these people, make a total fool out of myself, because that's what's going to happen. The inner critic, the voice in my head telling me, wait it out. So the crowd kind of thinned out a bit, and I approached her, and I just showed her my book and the project, and I flat out asked her if I said something along the lines of, hey, I know this is a total shot in the dark, but would you have any interest in possibly selling my book at your store? And she looked at it. She's like, and thumbed through it and read a couple of stories and didn't really say anything for, I don't know, 30 seconds, a minute. And she said, well, what would you like to sell it at? What's your selling point? And she asked the retail price where I'm selling it on Amazon. So I told her both. And after that, that's when she was kind of like, well, so I don't know if I made a mistake or if I said the wrong thing, but she's like, I think it might be a tough sell here. The bookstore itself, like, they mainly sell used books. They do have like some new titles in places, I noticed. But she, that was it. And she was very kind. And she's like, wish you all the best, and try Oblong, go the next town over, try this other bookstore. And so they were on my list too. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, yeah, they really promote local authors, and they XYZ. And I thanked her for our time, and that was it. And so basically the note exists because my wife didn't pick up the phone. So I was like, I got to tell someone.
Oh, yeah.
I sent out the note, and then everyone's like, hey, whoa, good job. And yeah, it was fun. So yeah, so that was the bookstore story.
Yeah, it's so hard. And it's the second guessing. I already have like just anxiety about talking to strangers anyway, but to be like going in, it just takes a lot out of you to like do it, just to make the move.
I was exhausted after. I was completely wiped out. I was like, it took everything out of me. I got home and I just sat down like, what did I just do?
That's awesome though. So, and then you went to this other store and something very different happened, correct?
Yeah. So then I followed up. Maybe under a week later, I went to the next store and spoke with a really wonderful attendant. And he said, congratulations. He's like, oh, we love our local authors. The vibe was different. Like right off the bat, I was more confident. Again, maybe it was the Substack community like cheering me on, or I don't know what it was, but I just felt a little more confident. And he gave me an email of the email address of the owner. He said she's away, won't return until another like week or so, but reach out to her. She'll get back to you eventually, and we'll go from there. And yeah, and sure enough, she said we can sell it on consignment, and kind of just went from there. And I haven't been back to the store yet to like see if it's stocked yet or whatever, but they requested a few copies, so I dropped them off. And yeah, they told me they would reach out when it's on the shelf. So I'm just kind of waiting for that, and then I'll.
Yeah. So explain to me, because I'm the person who doesn't know how to make an Excel spreadsheet, but selling on consignment, does that mean?
So basically I supply them with X number of books. They only asked for 5. I think most of their fiction, they stock with like 5 copies out in whatever table or display they have. So then if they run out, they'll reach back out to me for more copies. And then basically I'm supplying them, and then they'll take a percentage of whatever is sold. So they have like a set, which is rather fair. And that's basically it. So they don't purchase directly through the seller, which in my case is Amazon.
Right.
So they just come to me. I have to pay a couple dollars to have the Amazon copies printed or whatever, and then I drop them off at their request, basically.
Okay. So here's a question for you, because I'm thinking about bookstores and the kind of stuff that they like to do. Like, would you ever consider going to one of these places and like doing a reading kind of thing? Or have you talked to any places about that?
I've thought about doing one at my local library and at this bookstore. That takes up that like requires more courage on my part to ask of something like that. But I've had people tell me like, you should, why not? This is the perfect place to do it. They have authors come in all the time, local authors, famous, well-read, well-known authors. So maybe like I think it would be a lot of fun.
I would say if you sell like the first round of stock that they have, you could probably, have a little leverage there and be like, well, they're sold.
I know.
Before I give you some more, maybe we can have like a little night. And plus, like when it's local, you can actually like fill the place up with your friends and stuff, and that's business for them, So something to think about for a future leap if you needed another one. So now I want to actually go back in time because I already went out of order of my plan, but this is what happened with Jordan too. I had like these
all good,
beautiful, long-winded questions that just flew out the window when I sat down with him. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're just talking about whatever the hell comes out of our faces. So I want to go back to Along the Hudson and when you started that. And I'm curious what prompted you to start a newsletter. And at that point in your writing journey, like how big a leap was the Substack move for you?
I started writing online on a platform called Medium. I don't know if you've heard of Medium.
Yep.
So I started there, and I kind of pulled a 50s by the fire writing community on that site. And that's what got me writing online to begin with. So that over there, I called it the Friday Fix, and it was cool. It was the same concept, 50-word stories, and I would send out a prompt and all that. And that got me writing online, and it was a lot of fun. I pivoted to Substack because they changed their terms of service basically for the site, and like they could do whatever they want with your stories. And I don't know, there was just a lot of kind of strange things going on. So a lot of writers at that time left, and a handful of Medium writers, we moved to Substack. And so I actually started off writing on Substack. My publication name was Micro to Go, and I was writing 2 microfiction pieces a week, and it was going well for a while. I took a hiatus at some point. It was like, I don't know, hot and cold. And then I began writing on that again. And eventually I didn't know if the publication name suited me and what I wanted to do. I wanted to open it a little bit wider. It kind of had a 90s song title vibe, Micro to Go. And I also learned that it was the name of a deluxe children's scooter. So I was like, oh God, I need to move away from this.
Before they send you a cease and desist, right? For using their name.
Right. So I settled on Along the Hudson, and I forgot what your original question was.
No, just about, like kind of what prompted you to come to Substack? Like, how did you hear about Substack, just out of curiosity?
I heard about it through other writers that I was sort of following and conversing with on Medium. I think it was maybe Mark Starlin or Dasha Paylor is another one. Mark writes over at, what does he call it, Substack? He's really funny.
Mark Starlin
Monday morning.
Oh, Monday
Mark
mornings.
Starlin, right?
Yep.
Or is it Monday morning? He switched it at some point. So I always get confused when I refer to it. But so it was Mark and Dasha. She was writing at Eclectic Inc. for quite a while. Really, really great writer. And so there were a handful of us. Jimmy Doom wrote on Medium too. And yeah, so I think that's how I originally found Substack, was just word of mouth from other writers. And then it just felt like it was starting to catch. More people were coming to Substack. And around that time is when I sort of rebranded, and I wanted to okay, this is where I think home will be for me.
Right.
And I went that route. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Along the Hudson, I feel like it just speaks to what you're doing there I think it's a great name.
Thank you.
So I want to talk about the 50s by the fire, because I think that's kind of how I came to discover your Substack. Maybe. Honestly, I can't remember. It's so terrible.
Maybe, yeah.
But I think it's because I want people who are listening to know how freaking cool it is. And you could probably explain better how much it's grown, because I feel like since I've been participating, like the number of people that show up, I mean, there's a ton of responses now. And I think what's great about it is, especially for newer people on the platform, and like anytime I see somebody on Notes, it's like, oh, I'm new and I'm writing fiction and I don't know where all the fiction people are. Like, it's fictionistas and it's you, like, that I throw at them, because the 50s by the fire thing is just such a great way to sort of just like experiment with sharing in such a nice little way, like 50 words and that's it. Like, that's all you have. And it's challenging, but at the same time, like, it's doable. Like, I feel like you put out your 50-word story and it's not like, oh, I spent months and years like turning this story out, but like, and then you get to read other people's and you really get to see what people can do. And I feel like it's a great little taste of everybody's style, so that like, it's a great place to go and find people that you want to read, in addition to like trying out your own hand at like microfiction, which is just such a cool scene anyway. So I'm going to highly recommend anyone who's listening, check it out. And how often are you doing them now? Twice a month?
Twice a month. Yep. And like you said, I just like them for the fact that they don't ask a lot of anyone's time.
Right.
And it's a fun way to meet new people. And experiment with some writing, dip your toes in the water if you're a new fiction writer, and then you get to see so many other styles and approaches and that sort of thing. So
and I'll admit too to like cramming my story in at like last second, or I'll show up like the next morning. I was like, oh crap, I forgot. And I'll just, it's what's great is like I'll sit there and I'm like, okay, here's the prompt. And I won't get up until I've written the 50 words. Like it's a really good exercise in just commitment, because it's a commitment, but it's a small one. And it's just getting it done feels really good. So, and I posted like a while back in November, I think I had like enough of them that I could like create a Substack post out of them, which I did.
Yes.
So like
you
start to collect them, and then you've got like a little, and speaking of collecting, so now I'm going to ask you about your book. I'm assuming because you're a writer, and I haven't even asked where your writing roots started. Has this just been, first of all, do you teach English?
So oddly, I still do teach English. So I'm a special education teacher, and I teach a little bit of everything throughout the day. So I do push in for some larger classes, English and math. Oddly, I teach more math now than anything else. But my first teaching job, I did teach English, and I co-taught like creative writing and some other fun classes. So a little bit of everything.
So for you, when you started writing though, is this something that you've been doing since you were like a wee lad, or is this just something that you've picked up since you've become an adultish person?
Yeah, I would say in high school is when I started to take it seriously. I always enjoyed writing as a kid. I remember writing stories and enjoying them, but it wasn't until I think it was my junior year of high school. My teacher, she had this end of year project for us. We had to choose a topic, and it was like a community event, sort of like a science fair style situation where like everyone comes in and they're walking around and they ask you questions about your presentation. And there was a creative component to it, and I chose to write a short story for it. And it was still to this day maybe one of the darkest stories I've ever written. And that's when I caught the writing bug, and it was the first time I ever experienced that flow of writing when you're in that state of mind. When I remember finishing the story in like one sitting, looking at the clock, and 4 or 5 hours had gone by, and I was blown away that this could happen, And then I really bonded with my teacher through that. She pushed me. She told me, Deming, you could make a career out of this. And I was like, oh God, that's intimidating.
What did she tell you that for?
I know.
Dream big. No, stop telling us that. Teachers.
So that was that's what got the ball rolling, I think. And then in college, all the way through, I studied creative writing. I was an English major, and it was a lot of fun.
I should have done that. I was a theater major, because it's funny. I went with the intention, I kind of went undeclared, like you do when you don't know what the hell you want to do. But I got a very small scholarship. I think it might have been under $1,000, but it was for English if I was going in to study English. So that was sort of my intention. And then it was like first semester I took a theater class, and I'm like, no, this is what I'm going to do. So
that's awesome.
And it was really fun. It was a fun 4 years. And then it was a fun 8 years of trying to work in theater, which is almost as hard as working in writing. So I'm really, really smart about my career choices overall. So back to your book. So I'm assuming this is just having a book published has just always been on your radar. So was it just the fact that you had amassed so many of these 50-word stories that you're like, why the heck am I not just sticking these all between some pages and getting this out?
Maybe. Maybe. And a part of me, I feel I love the book. I love the stories in it, but to this day, I'm still like, I don't think it's my best writing. It doesn't reflect all of my writing. So I'm happy it's out there in the world. It's done. I have it. It's wonderful. But that part of me is still like contemplating that. Should I have gone this route off the bat, or should I have, in my opinion, like picked my favorite, like the stories that I think are the best, and maybe gone like a flash fiction collection or something like that.
But you can still do that, Justin. That's the thing.
Yeah,
See,
right.
But I totally understand what you're saying, because I'm already, I'm thinking about putting together like a short story collection at some point. And this is how my brain works. I already know that when it's done, it won't represent the best stuff I've ever done. Because you're always getting better. Like that's just what's going to happen. So like, I think we're always going to look back on stuff that's finished, be like, oh, if only I had A, B, C, D.
Right.
But it's there, and it's in the world. And it, when you have the stack of books, it's just going to be a really cool picture of where you came from and where you ended up.
Have you started mapping out what your collection might look like, or do you have an idea?
I've gone as far as to pull titles that I think would work. There's a lot of my stories because, when I started stock fiction, it was very much about stock photography and the fiction that comes out of it. And it's become very much whatever the hell I want. So I've kind of strayed from that a little bit. So some of the work I've done is very dependent on the photographs, which would be hard to, it's not like I couldn't rework the stories, but I certainly have enough of them that work without the photographs, which are the ones I'd probably be focusing on. So I've gone as far as like to make the list of titles. And my mother has sponsored me a subscription to InDesign, which is it's the Adobe thing for making books, which I've heard is like really good for putting them together. The piece that I'm like not sure about yet, which is going to require some research because I have a real beef with Amazon, which I've publicly declared, especially after I couldn't leave a review for your book and I still can't. Like they've like embargoed me. They're like, they won't let me leave reviews. And it's because I was too nice or something. I don't know. They could tell we were friends. I don't know. But plus I feel like Amazon is just eating writers' souls. So I'm going to try to avoid that if I can, which means I'm probably going to be spending some money and having to decide, if I want to have 100 copies or more of my own book sitting in my house and then try to hawk them, which is hard to do because that's the leap over and over and over again and showing up at places where you can sell it. And, so it's very early stages. I feel like I want to get this agent querying thing out of the way so I can say I did it. And then that'll be sort of my next item because it would be cool to have something maybe happening in time for the holidays this coming year, which gives me like a nice long window, but it'll be over before I know it. So I am trying to sort of at least be thinking about it in the background while I'm doing crazy stuff like this, like having a podcast all of a sudden. So I keep adding to the pile. And every time I add something new, it's like I'm in all these different places. So like I'm here and then I have my YouTube channel where I'm putting all this stuff. And then of course, Jordan encouraged me, but I was already going to do this. But like I've been working on getting Talk Fiction on Spotify and Apple Podcasts so people can listen to it there, which is like not that hard to do, but I'm learning some things. So like, for instance, the show notes that I put on Substack, which I essentially wrote like a standard Substack post, but the problem is those move with the feed to the other platforms where that big, long personalized email to my adoring fans doesn't really work. So I have to kind of work on what I put for words under each. So I'm just, it's a learning curve, but it's just you guys and my Substack people for now. So I have some time to figure it out. So yeah. So I will ask, because even though I don't really want to hang out with Amazon, you did choose to do that. And a lot of people do because they make it really easy and inexpensive to do it. So I'm curious what the bookmaking process was like for you and what was easy about it, what was not easy. And did you want to like throw in the towel at any point because it was frustrating or annoying or?
I think I'm grateful to have had a small team working with me. Without you and John, I couldn't have done, I don't know anything about.
I failed to mention that my thumbprint is in this book of yours, but it's I did the art for Justin's book.
Yeah. You helped a ton with the images and where, you had some suggestions of like what would look good here and that. So having your vision in terms of that helped a ton. So I think that took a lot of pressure off of me. John was just amazing with the cover and I had an idea and then he sent me something back and it was just way better than anything I had in mind. And I think that was the trickiest part was the image layout like the cover design, cover layout. In the final stages, we had to do a lot of just tweaking and resizing and stuff. So I think I annoyed the hell out of him. And I'm sorry, John, if you ever listen to this.
He will be listening to
it. I know. We went back and forth a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen. It was a lot because I also wanted to get it out before Christmas. I just had a window that I was hoping to get it out by. And of course, I had my 2-month slump of, I can't do this. I'm not going to ever, no, what am I? Yeah. So.
I don't know what you're talking about. That never happens to me.
Yeah. So I think that was the trickiest part, simply the cover. And now that I know the dimensions and how to configure some of that, it went a lot better. But some of the early copies and prints that I had done, there were these white bands on the bottom, and we didn't quite get the configuration right. So that was the biggest pain, but overall it was pretty painless overall.
Yeah. So I kind of want to ask how it's doing over there. Like, did you have a big surge in the beginning when you told everyone about it, and now it's kind of like lingering, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly it. No, it's done well. I mean, somewhere around 140 or something like that copies.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I had a really nice boost in the beginning. I sent a Facebook post out. I'm not on social media that much, but I was surprised with the overwhelming support that I received from just people in my life, old friends, family, neighbors, you name it, colleagues. And yeah, from the beginning, people were like, "Oh man, congrats! I'm picking up a copy." And that was maybe the most rewarding part of it for me. This kid I went to high school with, hadn't talked to him in, my God, 15 years, however long it's been, but we were good friends in like maybe middle school, but we haven't talked in 15 or more years. And yeah, he bought a copy of the book, and he's this like mechanic, lives in like where I'm from, and he's great guy. And he's like, "Hey, anything to support a hometown friend." And that was just
Oh, that's
one
so
of those
nice.
moments where, yeah, so those have been really special moments. Friends and family sending pictures. That's what's made it really special, you know? I never planned on, it was never going to sell thousands of copies, but it's in front of readers, and I think a lot of people have enjoyed it. So
I think like anything over 100 for self-publishing on Amazon is impressive, to be honest. I think that's really awesome. And one thing I haven't done very well, and I've sort of started like, I was off of, I didn't like leave Facebook, but I just never showed up there. Like I'm really only there because it's like my account is pretty locked up. Like I don't let people friend me.
sure.
It's just my family and close friends
Yep.
and people essentially that I knew, 20 years ago that I still feel like talking to, but I have no other way of talking to them. But I only recently sort of started, like when the Wadi thing happened, I went on there and I was kind of like, so this is what I've been doing for the last a couple of years. Anyone who cares. But what I haven't done is, just sort of like I really should reach out to people individually. I think people appreciate that for one thing, but like just to get like the little things, like I need people to like subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on Instagram, all those, to be honest, stupid things, but the numbers matter when you're trying to appear like people care what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And those things are so easy. You know what I mean? It's one thing to get, ask people you haven't talked to in 20 years, will you read my newsletter every week? It's kind of weird and I can't promise people like it all the time, but that's a commitment for them. But like to just go on a website they're on every other day anyway and just find me and push a button, but I haven't asked. It's like one of those things I just need to do. Like as part of my promotion, it's like, how about I talk to the people that actually know who I am and see if they want to support me? Which brings me to this is not the same subject, but going back to your book, I've noticed that you don't really mention it all that much on your Substack, and I'm wondering why that is. Why you don't put a little plug.
Oh yeah, I should. I don't. No, I don't. I'm horrible. I'm a horrible marketer. So that's A. and B, I don't know. I feel like it's still there in the background. Like I'm doing a lot with it. So I think it's still in my mind a lot, but maybe that's the place where I need to put it more, is on my Substack.
Well, it's almost like just a little line, because even though it might seem like repetitious, yeah, that's the word, to people that read you all the time, to see it every time, they'll just get used to scrolling past it. But you get new subscribers all the time who don't know that you have a book. So like for them, they're like, oh, I like this guy's stuff and he has a book that's not expensive that I can get, on Amazon in 2 seconds.
Right.
Yeah. So just something to think about. Not like I'm a marketing coach, but
no, yeah.
I feel like you could probably squeeze a few more copies out of things by doing something like that.
And my friend John Lytle's doing the heavy lifting in Texas for me. He went to an art show this 2 weekends ago, and I sent him 25 copies of the book, and he brought it with him, and he sold a handful of copies. And
awesome.
Yeah, so like the little, I don't know, it's happening a lot, I think, behind the scenes. And
right. Well, that's good.
But I need to bring it more into the forefront, though.
Is it on your about page? Like, do you have it like in your info?
God, no, I haven't updated my about page in a long time.
And you know where else? There's like a place where you can add links in your profile, and you could add it there too. Like it has a place for books, and you just add a link there.
I think I added it there.
I remember to look at these things like once every 3 months, and that's when I'm like, ooh, I haven't updated this in a while.
Yeah, it's a great point. That's good feedback though for anyone, I think, right? Just because my email to new subscribers, gosh, I haven't looked at that in 6 months. And I think I have linked to some recent favorite stories, but those are now from probably last May, April. I don't even know.
Yeah, just little things. It's work, man. There's always work to be done. So
I know.
it never stops. And for you, you have like a full-time teaching job on top of it. So it's even harder. The last thing I want to talk about, it doesn't have to be the last thing, but is your novel.
Oh, okay.
Because we're just talking about taking leaps. And you mentioned in, the first part of our discussion that you have abandoned novels in the past. So I was going to ask if this is the first attempt you've ever made to write a novel, but it sounds like maybe it's not.
No. So I've actually finished 2 novels, but I don't talk about them a lot. I kind of call them my burner projects, like my burner novels. I've written them. I think they were great learning experiences, but I don't know what I'll do with them, but they're there, they're finished.
That's amazing.
Thanks. Thank you. One's dating back maybe over a decade at this point. And it's fun looking back on it and just saying, wow, yeah, you see the growth, right? The second one was more of like a young adult sci-fi novel. And this one is, yeah, so I originally started writing this one on Substack, and I posted it over 3 different, it was I guess a small serialized story, and wrote it in 3 parts. Or was it 4? No, it was 3, right?
It was supposed to be 2 and then it was 3.
It was supposed to be 2 and then it was 3. Oh God, yeah. So I think that initial write through of it, that first draft, really made me fall in love with the characters, sort of the setting, their predicament, all of it. And it sort of was inspired by Fairy Tale by Stephen King. After reading that book, I just wanted to write a dark fantasy novel that had some kind of slip into another reality. And so that was my stab at it. But after writing it, and with months had passed, and I kept thinking about those characters, and I kept thinking about that subterranean society and this and all that. And I wanted to go back to it. And so I decided to scale back my Substack a little bit to just have that one-on-one adventure, that writing no one else is going to see. I think in a way I missed that, there's something special about just diving into a world of your own creation and just getting lost and resurfacing at some point. I don't know. I haven't written something like that and not shared it in a long time. I feel like the Substack way of doing things is constantly just churning out more and more work. So I think that was a part of the reason why I scaled back a little bit with Substack. Like every other week now I'm sharing a story, but it's really opened up. I don't know, I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Good. That's good. Well, because I talked a little bit about that in my interview with Jordan about how it's been a really long time since I had that working on something that's just for me, that sort of eats at your brain all day long. And every time you have a free second, you're like in front of the computer, but it's like a good way. It's not like there's any pressure from anyone but your imagination to like make sure whatever's in there is like getting out. So yeah, I'm still waiting for the next novel bug to bite me. And I have like just like the tiniest sliver of an idea, but I just have a feeling since the first few that I wrote were so, I don't want to say the writing them was easy, but like I was shocked at how quickly they sort of fell out of me into books, that I think this one's going to be a real kick in the ass for me. I just have a feeling it's not going to let me out that easy. So I'm sort of biding my time before I really want to know what I want it to be before I start. Like with the other books, I kind of was just like, I literally would just see people in my brain having a conversation. And that was all I needed to like start writing.
That's amazing.
It was a really cool way to write. And, but the problem is, now I'm sitting here trying to like pitch these books to agents, and it's not like they're not great stories, but it's possible that they lack the kind of like juicy, I mean, they're human stories. You know what I mean? They're like, you read them and you're like, yeah, I'm there. I know what this is. I know who these people are and I get this, but there's not like that meaty stuff that, sells a lot of books because it's just juicy off the shelf.
When you wrote those books, Meg, did you outline them? What was your process, or was it all just pantsing, as they say?
It was totally pantsing. It really was. And it's funny because I was taking a class at the time in writing children's literature and learning like, that pantsing is a legitimate way that some people write.
Oh yeah, of course.
Even knowing that, there's the recommendation. It's like, well, you should have like, guideposts or like a basic structure. Like, you need to have your your emotional arc and then your action arc. You know what I mean? So you need to know like what is happening over the course of this story and who's it happening to, like where's the change, where's the growth. But I didn't think about any of that ahead of time. I really didn't. But then I got to the end and I'm like, oh, but it happened anyway. Like the growth happened anyway. What I found would happen if I tried, and actually I wrote 4 YA novels, and then I wrote an adult novel, which is kind of like a spin-off. It's the same characters from C. Smile, but they're 10 years older.
Okay.
And it's like, it was me like basically like, I want to write a book for grown-ups, so there are gonna be lots of sex scenes in it. So it's like a very juicy sort of like funny beach read. And if you read C. Smile, like you would appreciate that the characters are still who they are. And it was just really fun for me to play with them again. But with that book, I did it for NaNoWriMo 2022, I think. Yeah, because it was the fall. I started Substack. And so I had my index cards. I'm like, I'm going to plot this novel. And at that time, I was on Twitter for 5 minutes. And I actually had like a picture I put up. I was like, look, the Panther plots. It was hilarious to me how quickly I threw those cards away. Like I was laughing because I had them in front of me. I'm like, here's what happens in this chapter. And then I'm like, just throwing them out the window. Like,
oh my gosh.
And it just went where it needed to go. So yeah, I just think that's the way I need to do it. But my books they're contemporary. They're like, there's not a lot of, if I was writing a sci-fi epic or something, I think it would probably behoove me to pay a little attention to what I was doing and not just fly by the seat of my pants. But no, that is kind of how I did it. So we'll see.
That's how I wrote my first, and it was a blast. I don't know. It was a wild ride all from start to finish, and it just came to life before me. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
What's great about when you let them happen that way is like they usually come out pretty fast. So you don't have that, like you hear stories about people who take like 5 or 10 years to finish a book, but I'm like, I don't think I could start a book, walk away for even like a month and then go back to it. Like by then I'm just like, it's gone. New stuff is filled in my head. So like, I really had to just sit down and just like gun it on all of them. And that's why I was able to write them, because I just didn't let anything else distract me from doing it. So I think it's hard. It's harder to write over a long period of time.
I'm starting to find that with this book that I'm writing, Off the Trail, I've taken the pressure off by not giving myself like, I need to finish this by this, like a deadline, right? I'm chipping away at it 100 words at a time, or I'll sit down and there's like another paragraph. I would say a solid writing session is maybe 500 words where I'll crank something out, but I'm not that deep into it. I'm looking at it as a marathon, but I just hope I can go the distance. I'm hopeful that I will, because I know where I want to take it, but I'm also letting the characters dictate what happens. So I feel like I have a few major kind of like waypoints or guideposts, and then it's like, okay, let's just see where this goes.
Yeah, well, that's the best part, I think. It's just letting them have the keys to the car, so to speak, because that tells you that they're good characters, though, Justin, because you're putting them in a situation and they're reacting the way that they'll react. You can't really force that if they're real people, which is ideally what you want to be creating. So, well, I look forward to reading it whenever it's finished, or even when it's not finished. If you ever need like someone to read any part of it, I'm happily volunteering to pay to read for you. So here's a question about this. So, because I'm always curious, everybody's end goal is different. So I'm curious with regard to writing, like what's the highest point that you would want to, I mean, I think most people would say like, oh, I want to be like a billionaire best-selling author, the one in the world, right? But I just, not everybody wants the same thing. So I'm always curious to ask, what would be your ideal situation? Like, would you ever want to just write if that was something you could like do and not have to work like a regular job?
I think so. But I also am trying to approach it realistically by saying, hey, look, I have a good job. My commute is 5-10 minutes down the road. So there are a lot of factors that play into it. Trying to take some pressure off in that way, where that's not my expectation. My expectation is not to become a full-time writer, and like sad, it's kind of a little sad looking at it that way. But also in other ways, it's a little uplifting because I have a job that allows me, I don't know, I have flexibility in terms of not taking a ton of work home. I do have time to write. As my kids get older, they'll become more involved. So all these things, I think someday down the line, if I could write full time, I would. But I don't hate my job. I like my job.
Yeah.
It's so I think there's something to be said for that. Yeah. At the end of my days, if I can look back and have a shelf of my books, maybe my friends and family only read them or what have you, I would be happy with that, But I don't think writing will ever leave my life. So knowing that kind of brings me a little joy and like sense of relief. So I think that's kind of where I'm at, looking at it more through the lens of it's something I love. It will always be a part of my life, but I need to keep a roof over my head and my family. So
right.
That's kind of where I've landed,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as I embark on this querying thing, I go back and forth on it like every other day. I'm like, do I actually really want this? Because
I know,
and I'm coming from like my theater background too, where like it's, there was a time when I wanted to be like an actress, like on TV or in the movies or on Broadway. Like, I've always had these sort of lofty, what's the highest point I can get in the thing that I love doing?
Mhm.
What happens is, I mean, it's not like you shouldn't expect it to be hard, but like it's harder than we all want
Yes.
to believe when we're young and
Mhm.
I think you see where it could go and you're like, well, yeah, obviously that's where I want to go. But what I'm trying to like reprogram myself to see or to embrace is that like there's a middle ground that could be as rewarding, if not more so, because then you can have the balance of like, I've been at work at my new part-time job for like a week now. I'm like, this is freaking great because I go there and I do the work and then I go home and I just leave it there. Like because I've had part-time jobs before where I couldn't do that because the people that were like in charge didn't pull their weight. And then I always felt responsible for things. But this place, like the boss is like, she's there before everyone. She's the last person to leave. You don't feel like abandoned. You know what I mean? And my skills are already appreciated. Like I didn't have to work my way up. I just walked in and started working. And like, I think about writing when I'm there, but I don't feel like I'm being cheated out of the time that I could be writing. Like, I actually think it's really good for me to have something else because it can be like exhausting when you spend all your time, because then the voices creep in, the voices you were talking about, the like, why am I spending so much time on this when I'm not this far along yet? And that's the other thing we can remember too. Like, I don't know how old your kids are. Mine are 8 and 11 now.
5 and 3.
Yeah. So, I mean, they need us still now, but there's going to be a point where they're like, get the hell out of my room. Like, I don't want to talk to you. And you're going to suddenly have all this time. And then if you look even further, which is, morbid, but like, when we're 60, honestly, like part of me is like, oh man, I can't wait till I'm 60 because my kids will be like grown and like gone and maybe my husband will be retiring. And then you're just going to have like time on your hands.
I know.
And just think about how amazing we'll be at writing if we write between now and the time we're 60. We're going to be like freaking superstars. So we'll see what happens. But I'm enthusiastic for both of us. And just the fact that we're still showing up on Substack
Agreed.
and elsewhere is because you see it. I mean, people fade out. It always makes me a little sad when I sense it happening. And part of me is like, I should reach out to those people. But then I'm like, maybe they want to fade out. I don't know.
I think it's part of it becoming so overwhelming because I feel that too sometimes where you feel I'm missing out in my real life with the people around me and my family where I need to balance that out some more.
Right.
Step away from Substack and give myself some time to, yeah. So I feel that too, I think sometimes. Everyone has their reasons, right?
Absolutely. Well, I guess I will say, if we want to take like 2 minutes, if you have anything to ask me, I wrote on here, flip the mic, because you mentioned that. You're like, oh, maybe I'll turn around and interview you. So if you had any questions for me before we close out, because we're just about nearing the hour mark here, which I think is about what most listeners can tolerate.
Let's see. So in terms of the new flower shop gig,
Mm-hmm.
how do you think that's helped your writing, and in what ways has it helped your writing?
I think it's only been a week so far, but I would say it's helped me. Like, so I'm working Monday, Thursday, Friday, and I did that so that like I would have two-day windows. And the weekends are tough because my kids are around. It's a little harder, but like when they're in school on Tuesday, Wednesday, like today, for instance, the day was mine and I really felt like I wanted to get things done. I had like a little list and I got back, I'm a big list person, but for a while I wouldn't be doing that. I would just sit down and I get hung up on something. But now I'm a little more deliberate in how I spend those days that I have, because I really am juggling a bunch of different things. And I think that's okay. But now that I have fewer days to do that, I'm finding it's helping me focus a little bit more. Like I have this list sitting up on my wall here. It says current projects. It says February 2024, and granted it's March now, but it says to be completed before taking on anything else. And most of them are checked. And actually, Interview Justin is going to get checked right now.
Yes, we did it.
Yes. So now I just have like 2 more things on that list. So that's what I'll do before I pick up anything else. Yeah, I think it's just been good for.
Well, you said you're more deliberate in how you spend
just
your
deciding
time.
what's most important. Like, what do I need to get done first? Even if it's not the thing, that I necessarily want to do the most, like this agent query stuff. Like, I don't want to do that at all, but I'm going to find a way to chip away at it with my free days because I have the time to do it. So
I think that's what helps me with work too, honestly, because I come home, my wife is an RN. So when she's commuting home, like hopefully the kids are asleep and that's my writing time. But I have like an hour maybe some nights, and he tries to take advantage. And I wish I could go back 10 years sometimes, because then I think, what did I do with all that time that I had when
we took naps? That's what.
Yes, we did nap a lot, I think.
We napped a lot, man. In college, I napped every day, like between classes too. I would like fall asleep in the library. I was so tired. And I didn't even party or anything. I just was tired from using my brain a lot and walking. We had a big campus, so there's a lot of walking. I don't know how to nap anymore. Since I had kids, because there was that whole thing, like after you have kids, it's like, oh, you nap when your kids nap. I'm like, no, you don't. That's when you do all your chores and like all the stuff that you can't do when they're awake.
So true.
So I was going to say, as just a final question for you, and if you have one, like, what do you think your next big leap is going to be?
The next big leap. Oh man, it's a great question. So maybe this. I would like to start sending some short stories back out to other publications. You just spend so much time. I don't know. I haven't submitted a story in like 2 years.
Yeah.
And maybe it's time to get back into doing that a little bit. I don't know. Maybe just, even if it's nothing more than for the validation of hearing someone say, yes, there is something rewarding about that. Try some venues that I haven't before. And yeah, maybe that, or see if there are any publications that will accept previously published stories. And then I can shop around some that are already written on Substack. So maybe that is the most immediate that I can.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. And I submitted a story today, actually.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I recently subscribed to like it's like one of those curator, like here's a bunch of things that are accepting submissions.
Oh, fun.
There was this one where they were doing a dragons theme, and I had just written that poem, that dragon
poem. Yes.
So I was like, oh, this is actually like a really good fit. So I'm just kind of keeping my eyes peeled for stuff like that. I wouldn't say I'm actively looking for places to submit, but if something like already feels like I got this story right here for this, I definitely want to try to do that too. And then my other big thing is and I set a goal for the queries of sending 50 of them in honor of your 50s. And just because I think 50 is
all right.
a nice round number. So I don't think my goal was to try to just crank them out in the month of March, but I expect it'll take me longer than that. And that's okay. But I think if I can get 50 of them out, then I can say I did this, and hopefully I won't get, 50 rejections, but we'll have to wait and see on that. So, all right.
I wish you all the best. That's amazing news.
And you too. And this was so great to see your face and hear your voice and realize I know how to pronounce your last name. So that's good. Thank you so much for doing this. And
thanks, Meg.
Should be fun when we publish. I'll keep you posted. All right.
Thank you. Take care.
I don't care if you believe me. Fire is coming, fire is coming. Birds of the meadow, birds of the meadow. Fire is coming, fire is coming. Birds of the meadow, birds of the meadow.
Hey there. Thanks so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, please let me know by hitting the like button, leaving a comment, rating, or review, depending on where you're listening, or by sharing this podcast with your favorite people. Stock Fiction is a dynamic anthology of short fiction, essays, poetry, humor, and multimedia experiments written and produced by me, Meg Oolders. If you're into the stuff I'm making, or you're just into supporting the dynamic individual who makes it, I hope you'll consider becoming a free or paid subscriber today. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.